The elderly gentleman's hands trembled as he settled into the seat opposite me. For a fleeting instant, I worried he might be experiencing a medical emergency. He wasn't. His gaze fixed upon my countenance, and what he was about to articulate represented the inaugural benevolent sentiment I would encounter amidst the bleakest period of my existence. However, before I relay his words, I must first illuminate the nature of the day I had just endured for the diner on Fleur Drive. At precisely 10:47 in the evening on Tuesday, October 14th, 2025, was no mere happenstance. It was the culmination of a journey, a path I had long understood myself to be treading, and every league of that route was strewn with the remnants of what I had lost. At 10 o'clock that morning, I found myself in a conference room situated on the third floor of Meridian Distribution, located in Des Moines, Iowa. This was an organization where I had dedicated 16 years of my professional life. The company where my career began at the age of 31 as a warehouse supervisor. I had diligently ascended the ranks to become a regional operations manager. And much like individuals who harbor expectations based on unwavering stability, I had anticipated retiring from its employ. The individual seated across from me bore the name Vance Kettering. He held the esteemed position of the new vice president of operations, dispatched from the parent corporation that had absorbed Meridian 6 months prior. He was a man of 34 years, clad in attire that commanded a price exceeding my monthly mortgage remittance, and in his grasp he held a file bearing my name. "Griffin," he began, his tone devoid of preamble, "I aim to be entirely transparent with you. The restructuring initiative has reached its conclusion, and your role has been rendered obsolete. This decision is not predicated on your performance. Your evaluations have consistently been exemplary. This is strictly a consequence of the operational optimizations necessitated by the merger." "When will this take effect?" I inquired. "Today, immediately. Human Resources will escort you from the premises once our discussion concludes." 16 years. I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "I understand. The severance package is commensurate with your tenure. It encompasses 8 weeks of salary, the continuation of your benefits until the close of this month, and outplacement services should you choose to utilize them." 8 weeks? The words felt hollow, a stark contrast to 16 years of arriving at 5 o'clock in the morning to open warehouses, laboring through holidays when others sought respite, and meticulously training every supervisor who had ever fallen under my purview. And here was Vance Kettering, reducing that profound commitment to a mere 8 weeks and a nominal outplacement service, for which I was expected to express gratitude. "Is there anything at all I can do?" I implored. "Griffin, I appreciate your inquiry, but regrettably no. The decision is irrevocable. Human Resources escorted me out at 10:47 in the morning. They permitted me to gather a cardboard receptacle containing my personal effects from my workstation, a cherished photograph of my children, a coffee mug emblazoned with the phrase "World's Okayest Dad," a gift from Juno on a past Father's Day when she was merely 7 years of age, and a Rubik's Cube which had eluded my complete solution for 3 years. They then accompanied me to the parking facility. My employee identification badge was confiscated. No handshake was offered. I remained seated in my Honda Pilot within the parking lot for 40 minutes. Tears did not fall. Griffin Locke is not a man inclined to weep in parking lots. I simply sat, observing the comings and goings of my former colleagues, their access to a building I could no longer enter. The radio offered a melody unfamiliar to my ears, and I experienced the peculiar levity of a man whose core identity had just been stripped away, grappling with his sense of self in the void between what was and what now is. I made my way home. The residence in Beaverdale, which Roxanne and I had acquired in 2014, a dwelling boasting 3 bedrooms, a finished lower level, and a backyard with a swing set that had since been repurposed into a garden bench as the children had outgrown it. Roxanne's vehicle was present in the driveway. She was home earlier than usual, the reason for which remained unknown to me. The revelation arrived at 3:12 in the afternoon. Griffin, we need to have a conversation. Roxanne, I began, my voice laden with the morning's news. I was laid off this morning. I'm aware, she responded. You know, Meridian circulated an internal announcement regarding the restructuring last week. I learned of it through my friend Petra. Her husband is employed there. I knew this was imminent. You knew, and you withheld this information from me? I needed to finalize certain arrangements first. What arrangements? She drew a breath, the kind one takes before delivering a pronouncement that has been meticulously rehearsed, a breath that carries its own ominous premonition. I am initiating divorce proceedings, Griffin. The room seemed to sway, not dramatically, but subtly, enough to be perceptible. It was akin to a vessel adjusting its ballast, settling into a new, albeit slight, angle relative to the water. What? I've been consulting with an attorney for the past 3 months. My intention was to inform you next week, but given today's events, it seems prudent to do so now. The termination of your employment actually streamlines the division of our assets. The firing simplifies things. Your income will be substantially diminished. The calculations for alimony will prove more advantageous to you if we proceed with the filing while you are without employment. My legal counsel has indicated that this is, in fact, the optimal juncture. Roxanne, what are you implying? She regarded me, the woman I had married in 2008, the woman with whom I had spent 17 years constructing a shared existence. 2 children, a home, a compilation of holiday cards, countless small routines, the leisurely Sunday morning coffee, the casual Friday night takeout, the tender gesture of her hand on the back of my neck as I drove, the profound intimacy accumulated over the course of a marriage. Yet, her face now presented itself as that of an utter stranger. There was no anger, no sorrow, merely finality. I am stating that I have been orchestrating this for the past 6 months. I am informing you that I relocated the children's essential belongings to my sister's residence last week while you were occupied with extended work hours. I have already conveyed the news of our separation to Kipton and Juno. I am taking the children this evening, and we will resolve the custody arrangements through our respective legal representatives. You informed the children before you informed me. I disclosed the situation to the children last Sunday. They are presently staying with my sister. I returned home early today to pack my belongings and to be present for your arrival so that I could communicate this news to you directly. Why are you doing this? She held my gaze for an extended period, then uttered the words that would echo in my consciousness for the remainder of my days. Because you are utterly without value, Griffin. 16 years, and you never progressed beyond the role of supervisor. I had envisioned greater potential within you. I was mistaken, and I have no intention of dedicating the remainder of my life in anticipation of a man whose professional zenith was warehouse management, discovering his true self. With that, she rose, ascended the staircase, completed the packing of a suitcase she had largely prepared beforehand, carried it downstairs, loaded it into her vehicle, and departed for her sister's abode in Urbandale, where it transpired my children were already awaiting her. I stood in the driveway, watching the receding crimson glow of her taillights vanish down our street. Our street where Kipton and Juno and I had participated in trick-or-treating for 11 years, where I knew the names of every canine resident, where my mailbox bore the Locke family name in elegantly crafted brass letters I had personally affixed in 2014. Worthless. 16 years. Never became anything more than a supervisor. I retreated indoors. The house was enveloped in a silence that only houses can possess when the very individuals who imbued it with sound have recently departed. I wandered through the rooms. Kipton's domain was largely bereft of its former contents. His gaming apparatus, his posters, his preferred garments, all gone. She had spirited them away the preceding week while I was engaged in my late-night work. Juno's room mirrored this emptiness. Her collection of stuffed animals, her cozy reading corner, her treasured pillow, all vanished. The carpet in the hallway bore the distinct indentations where her bookshelf had been roughly dragged. Dragged because Roxanne had systematically emptied the entirety of my children's worldly possessions while I was diligently laboring to earn the very paycheck that, it now appeared, had been delaying her departure. I sank onto the sofa in the living area. I had previously stated that Griffin Locke is not a man who weeps. However, I now experienced the profound emptiness of an individual who had, within the span of mere hours, lost two pillars of his existence, elements he had steadfastly believed to be immutable. At precisely 9:30 in the evening, I enter my vehicle. Remaining within the confines of the house was untenable. A sojourn to my parents in Arizona was out of the question. My father, Franklin, and my mother, Rosalind, are individuals of considerable emotional distance. Their communication largely confined to text messages, and their presence would have constituted as much of a burden as a source of solace. Seeking refuge with friends was also not an option. I possessed professional acquaintances and neighbors, but Roxanne had been the architect of our social sphere, and in her absence, I recognized the ambiguity surrounding the true ownership of our friendships. Were they mine, or had they been merely on loan to me? I navigated south along Beaver Avenue, then proceeded east on University, and subsequently turned south on a Fleur Drive. This was aimless motoring, the kind undertaken by men in similar predicaments, men who find themselves unable to return to their homes and without any alternative destination. My gaze fell upon the P&E Diner, a modest establishment operating 24 hours a day, its windows illuminated by neon signage, exuding the particular warmth characteristic of greasy spoon diners, especially when one feels as though they are freezing from the inside out. I parked the vehicle and entered. I ordered coffee, black. The waitress, a woman named Delphine who had been a fixture there for 19 years, did not inquire about my well-being. She met my gaze, truly seeing me, and without a word, poured the coffee, placed it before me, and softly uttered, "Take all the time you need, honey." I occupied a booth near the window, observing the raindrops tracing patterns on Fleur Drive. It was at 10:47 in the evening when the diner door swung open, admitting an elderly gentleman. He was tall and slender, with silver hair, attired in a brown corduroy jacket, and he carried an air of quiet contemplation. He approached the counter, ordered cherry pie and coffee from Delphine, his request delivered with the practiced cadence of someone who had repeated the same order in the same establishment countless times. He then turned, seeking a place to sit, and his eyes fell upon me. He halted mid-stride, his right foot suspended in the air, and he made no move to place it down. He simply stood, his eyes fixed upon my face, his complexion draining to the hue of the coffee cups stacked behind the counter. Delphine observed his distress. "Mr. Orley, are you quite all right?" He offered no response to her query. He approached my booth, bypassing his customary seat and the counter, and proceeded to sit down opposite me without invitation. He was trembling, a man of 74 years, his frame racked with tremors, was staring into my face as if I were a specter who had materialized in his life 3/4 of a century too late. "Sir," I ventured, "may I be of assistance?" He attempted to speak, but his voice failed him. He tried again. You bear a striking resemblance to my son. I beg your pardon? My son. You are remarkably like him. However, he has been unaccounted for 35 years. These were the very words I could never have anticipated hearing on a Tuesday evening in a diner on Fleur Drive. Not from a stranger, not from anyone. A man informing me that I bore a likeness to his missing son, a son who had vanished in 1990 when I was a mere 12 years old, and Thaddeus Orley, then a 39-year-old father, was on the precipice of an existence irrevocably bifurcated into the periods before and after. Yet before I recount the identity of Thaddeus Orley and the circumstances surrounding his son Rowan's disappearance, and before I detail what Thaddeus Orley proposed to me in that diner booth at 10:47 in the evening on the most calamitous day of my life, I must first describe the events that transpired in the subsequent 5 minutes. For those 5 minutes constituted the pivotal juncture. All that preceded them marked the demise of Griffin Locke's life, as he knew it. All that followed heralded the opportunity for Griffin Locke to embark upon an entirely different existence. I recognize how this may sound, Thaddeus articulated. He retrieved his wallet, opened it, and extracted a photograph. It had been laminated, carried, and relaminated across decades. He placed it on the table between us and gently slid it in my direction. This is Rowan. This photograph was taken in October of 1990, 3 days before he vanished. I scrutinized the image. A young man, 19 years of age, stood before a brick edifice, clad in an Iowa State University sweatshirt. His hair was dark, his jawline pronounced, his eyes set slightly wider than average, and the nascent growth of a beard traced his jaw. He was beaming at the camera, the effervescent grin of a young man utterly unaware that within 72 hours he would drive out of Ames on a Friday afternoon and disappear from the face of the earth. I studied the photograph, and at that moment, I comprehended the reason for the old man's trembling. For the face captured in the photograph, the visage of a 19-year-old boy from 1990, was my own. Not merely a likeness, but a perfect replication. If you were to advance that boy's age by 28 years, dress him in my attire, and add the fine lines around my eyes and the gray streaks in my sideburns, you would see me. Griffin Locke at 47. Sir, I responded, my voice softer than I had intended. This is extraordinary, but I assure you, I am not your son. I was raised in Des Moines. My parents are Franklin and Rosalind Locke. I am intimately familiar with my family. I am not adopted. I believe you, he assured me. Then allow me to clarify. I'm not posing the question of whether you are my son. I know my son. He possessed a birthmark on the back of his left shoulder, a patch precisely shaped like the state of Texas. By the very manner in which you are seated, I can ascertain its absence. I am not under any delusion. I am 74 years old. I have dedicated 35 years to the search for my son, and I have cultivated the discernment to differentiate between genuine hope and unadulterated delusion. Then, what exactly are you requesting of me? Have you ever gazed upon a photograph of someone who precisely mirrors how you might envision your grown child to appear? If you had a son who disappeared at the age of 19 and you dedicated every single day for 35 years to picturing what his face might look like now, and then, one evening, you entered a diner you have frequented for 15 years and observed a 47-year-old man seated in a booth, a living embodiment of your son's age progression, what course of action would you take? I looked at this elderly gentleman, this stranger who had just confided that the most devastating day of his life had occurred 35 years prior and had remained a persistent affliction. My own day, the termination of my employment, the dissolution of my marriage, the confiscation of my children, paled in comparison. It was not the worst day he had ever heard of, nor even within his top 10. I would take a seat in the booth, I replied. Precisely. And then I would undertake an action I have refrained from for the entirety of my 35-year search. I would implore the gentleman at the table for his assistance. I am uncertain how I could offer any meaningful aid, sir. Nor am I. That is precisely why I am asking, he explained. Over the course of the ensuing 40 minutes, punctuated by 2 refills of coffee and a slice of cherry pie that neither of us consumed, Thaddeus Orley recounted the poignant narrative of his son, Rowan. Rowan Orley entered the world in 1971, the sole child of Thaddeus and his wife, the elder Orleys. He was an intelligent, methodical young man, the type who, at the tender age of 9, would dismantle the family lawnmower to comprehend its inner workings, only to reassemble it with enhanced efficiency. He attended Ankeny High School, graduating in 1989, and subsequently enrolled at Iowa State University, pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering, driven by a desire to emulate his father, who had recently established a modest enterprise specializing in metal fabrication, known as Orley Precision Manufacturing. On October 5, 1990, Rowan departed his dormitory at Iowa State University at 2:15 in the afternoon, intending to drive home to Ankeny for a weekend visit. His mother was preparing a pot roast, and his father had secured tickets to an Iowa State football game the following day. Rowan steered his 1988 Toyota Corolla onto Interstate 35 southbound. He never reached his destination. His vehicle was discovered abandoned at a rest stop along Interstate 35, near exit 123, the ensuing morning. The doors were unlocked, the keys remained in the ignition, and his backpack rested on the passenger seat. It contained his textbooks, his wallet with $47 in cash still intact, and an unopened bottle of water. There were no indications of a struggle, no signs of violence, and no trace of his presence whatsoever. The investigators dedicated themselves diligently to the case for the first year, Thaddeus recounted. Subsequently, the case grew cold, then colder still, eventually becoming dormant. I, however, sustained its momentum, employing private investigators, participating in DNA registries, engaging with missing persons networks, and even making televised appearances on programs that aired in the early morning hours on cable channels. I have expended approximately $600,000 over the span of 35 years in my quest to locate my son. Were there ever any promising leads? Dozens. All ultimately proved fruitless. Rowan bears no resemblance to any of the individuals I have been presented with. At times, there have been superficial similarities, but never him. He paused. Until tonight. Sir, I am not him. I understand you are not. That is precisely my point, Griffin. I recognize that you're not Rowan, but you represent what Rowan would appear like if he were alive today. For 35 years, I have endeavored to persuade forensic artists, age progression software, and my own weary mind to generate that visage, and not one of them has ever succeeded in producing what I am witnessing across this table at this very moment. What is it that you require from me? I wish to employ you. To do what precisely? To serve as his likeness. To aid me in my endeavor to find him. To accompany me on investigations, and to stand in spaces where my son's face might be recognized. To permit forensic artists to utilize you as a reference point. To collaborate with me in the ongoing search for Rowan. I have been engaged in this solitary pursuit for 35 years. I am now 74. I do not possess another 35 years to dedicate. If your countenance is indeed what he would appear like, the living, breathing, three-dimensional representation of my son, then I require that face as part of my team. Regardless of your current salary, I will offer double that amount. I will provide housing. I will furnish transportation. I will supply whatever you necessitate. I am merely requesting permission to utilize this. He gestured towards my face, to locate him. I contemplated Thaddeus Orley, a man of 74 years, a widower retired, and possessed of sufficient wealth to offer me $156,000 in accommodation based solely on the contours of my jawline. I quickly calculated the financial realities. My severance package would expire in 8 weeks. My monthly mortgage payment was $2,100. My obligation for child support, once determined, would likely add another $1,400. My career had been obliterated by a corporate restructuring. My marriage had been terminated by a woman who had deemed me worthless merely an hour before I entered this very diner. I'm no longer employed, I stated. I'm aware, I surmised. Look at your face, Griffin. Observe your posture. Whatever transpired for you today has occurred, and I am extending this offer not out of pity. I am offering it because your face represents the most valuable asset I have encountered in 35 years of searching for my son. You are worth precisely what I am proposing. Whatever circumstances led you to this diner this evening, they guided you to the correct booth. I absorbed it all. The proposition, the trembling 74-year-old man seated before me, the confluence of the worst day of my life with a search that had commenced when I was merely 12 years old. I require time to consider this offer. Naturally, I am available to meet tomorrow. At your convenience, anywhere. I will come to you. Your residence? I wish to see your home. I want to comprehend the environment into which I would be stepping. Noon tomorrow. Here is the address. He scribbled it on a napkin. Thaddeus Orley. A farm property situated on County Road 22 on the outskirts of Ankeny. He slid the napkin across to me. He then rose, proceeded to the counter, settled his bill for the pie and my coffee, and turned back to me one final time. Griffin, he said, whatever your decision may be, I am profoundly grateful that you did not depart this diner when I approached your table. I had no other place to be, nor did I for 35 years. I extend my sincerest regrets for whatever ordeal you experienced today, and I'm immensely thankful that it ultimately led you to this particular booth. He then departed. I remained in the diner for another hour, sipping coffee that Delphine replenished without prompting, my gaze fixed upon the photograph of Rowan Orley, which Thaddeus had intentionally left on the table, confident that I would bring it with me the following day. I drove to Thaddeus Orley's residence at noon the subsequent day. The estate encompassed 42 acres along County Road 22, just beyond Ankeny. It was farmland that had been within his family for 3 generations, but was no longer actively cultivated. The primary residence was a meticulously restored 1920s farmhouse, its clapboard siding painted white, adorned with green shutters, the kind of dwelling that exuded an aura of having been maintained with personal care and affection rather than by hired contractors. Adjacent to the main house stood a guest cottage, featuring 2 bedrooms and a stone foundation, with a wood-burning stove visible through a window. Beyond the cottage stretched cornfields to the distant horizon, and the unique silence of rural Iowa permeated the air, not as an absence of sound, but as a palpable presence. Thaddeus greeted me at the door. He appeared considerably more composed than he had the previous evening. Dressed in a gray cardigan and khakis, his countenance reflected that of a man who had, perhaps for the first time in 35 years, managed to achieve some measure of restful sleep. He ushered me into his study, a chamber lined with filing cabinets, binders, an array of photographs, and several maps. A chronological timeline adorned one wall, commencing with October 1990 on the far left and extending to October 2025 on the far right. A testament to 35 years of meticulously documented information, research, and tentative connections. An organized monument to enduring grief. This, he declared, indicating the room with a sweeping gesture, is what I have meticulously constructed. Every investigative lead, every inquiry, every flicker of misplaced hope, Should you agree to collaborate with me, this space will become your professional domain. He guided me through the accumulated records, not exhaustively, as that would have necessitated a week's time, but he highlighted the principal avenues of investigation. He detailed the private investigators he had engaged, spanning 3 distinct firms over the 35-year period. He presented the databases he had accessed, the DNA registries he had utilized, and the cases he had personally undertaken journeys to investigate. There was the persistent Jane Doe case in Nebraska, an individual suffering from amnesia in Illinois, and a prisoner in Oklahoma who had been apprehended under an assumed identity. None, however, had proven to be Rowan. What is your current hypothesis regarding what transpired? I inquired. Honestly, I do not know. That is the unvarnished truth. The rest stop where the vehicle was discovered was not an area where acts of violence typically occurred. The investigation yielded no evidence of abduction, nor any indications of a struggle. For many years, the prevailing theory was that Rowan had absconded, that some event in his life had compelled him to leave voluntarily. He was a 19-year-old engineering student. He had no romantic partner, no history of substance abuse, and no apparent financial difficulties that I was privy to. He offered no justification for his departure. But I am his father, and I couldn't access his thoughts. Perhaps there was a rationale that escaped my perception. Do you entertain the possibility that he's still breathing? I believe it's a plausible scenario. 35 years represents a considerable duration for human remains to remain undiscovered. If he chose to vanish and adopt a new identity, he could be residing anywhere. Conversely, if he was abducted and slain, his remains might have surfaced by now. This nation has excelled in identifying remains through DNA analysis. Therefore, I persist in my search, not due to certainty, for I possess none. He met my gaze. I need you to grasp the commitment I'm soliciting from you. This is not an enjoyable escapade. This is a process of profound sorrow. You will be visiting morgues. You will be engaging with families of other missing individuals. You will be examining photographs of remains. You will be witnessing the most dreadful occurrences that have befallen people, all while hoping that Rowan did not suffer the ultimate misfortune. If you're not prepared for this reality, I need to be informed immediately. My 16 years managing a logistics operation have equipped me to handle challenging information. This differs from logistics. I acknowledge the distinction, but I can manage it. And sir, I require a new beginning. My previous chapter concluded yesterday. The life you are presenting to me is unconventional and arduous, entailing a depth of grief that is not intrinsically mine. However, it is also the sole prospect I have, and the first opportunity offered in a considerable period that bestows upon me a sense of value. He observed me for a moment, not with scrutiny, but with simple observation, as if I were someone whose response he had long awaited. Then, welcome to the endeavor, Griffin Locke. Let us embark on the quest to locate my son. The subsequent week, I relocated to the guest house, bringing 2 suitcases of attire, my laptop, and a solitary cardboard receptacle from my former workspace at Meridian. All else, the furnishings, the kitchen implements, the accumulated recollections tethered to a domicile in Beaverdale slated for sale as part of the divorce proceedings, I left behind. Roxanne could manage its disposition. My part in that was complete. The guest house, though compact, was self-contained. It featured a sleeping chamber, a sitting area with a wood-burning hearth, a kitchen equipped with a gas range predating my own existence, and a veranda offering views of the cornfields. I had not experienced a truly quiet environment in Des Moines. Even in Beaverdale, there was perpetually a subtle ambient noise. The rumble of traffic, the murmur of neighbors, the whirring of suburban heating and cooling systems. The guest house on Thaddeus's property was different. At night, The only sound I discerned was the whisper of wind through the corn. The undertaking commenced gradually. Thaddeus was not a man inclined to haste. He dedicated the initial 2 weeks to immersing me in the case, every facet of it, every investigative avenue, every hypothesis that had been explored and subsequently discarded. I familiarized myself with the names of investigators spanning 3 decades. I comprehended the layout of the Interstate 35 rest stop where Rowan's vehicle was discovered. I absorbed Rowan's medical background, his disposition, his habits, and the distinctive cadence of his laughter, which Thaddeus still replicated when recounting anecdotes about him. This was not an imitation for dramatic effect, but rather an involuntary physical recollection. He would laugh like this, Thaddeus remarked one evening, demonstrating a brief, exhalated chuckle that originated from his chest rather than his throat. The act of a father mimicking a son absent for 35 years was, to me, one of the most peculiar and deeply personal spectacles I had ever witnessed. Kipton and Juno visited every other weekend. I had been granted visitation rights every other weekend and each Wednesday evening. It was less than I desired, but more than Roxanne had initially proposed. The legal representatives had brokered the arrangement. I collected the children at 5 o'clock in the evening on Fridays and returned them by 7 o'clock on Sundays. During these intervals, they resided with me in the guest house on the farm. Kipton, at 15 years of age, was initially reserved. He was uncertain of how to navigate his father's new circumstances. He was unacquainted with the dynamics of a divorced family. He did not know what to say to Thaddeus, the enigmatic elder gentleman inhabiting the grand residence, whose son had vanished long before Kipton's parents had even crossed paths. For the initial month, Kipton maintained a demeanor of politeness and quietude, dedicating the majority of his time within the guest house to playing video games on his laptop. Juno, at 11 years of age, presented a stark contrast. Juno arrived at the farm on the inaugural weekend and, with immediate conviction, declared it a narrative and that she was destined to be a participant. She proceeded to the main house, rapped on Thaddeus's door, introduced herself, and within 30 seconds of their encounter, stated, "My dad said you lost your son. I'm sorry. My dad got lost too. Not for 35 years, but he did get lost." Thaddeus regarded Juno, then me standing behind her on the porch, and then returned his attention to Juno. "Your father was lost? He lost his employment and my mother and us, all in the span of a single day. He was profoundly lost, but now he is present, and he is no longer lost. I comprehend. Do you believe your son remains lost?" "I believe so. I hope so. Because if he is still lost, he can still be found." "What if he has no desire to be found?" Thaddeus pondered this. He was 74 years of age, being posed the most significant query of his life by an 11-year-old who had approached his doorstep with her hands tucked into her pockets. "If he has no desire to be found, then I shall accept that. However, I require confirmation. Children do not simply vanish. Something transpired to him. I am indebted to him for the truth." Juno nodded as if she fully understood. Then she inquired, "May I call you Uncle Thad?" Thaddeus, a widower of 74, who had described himself as childless for 35 years, looked at my daughter, and a subtle transformation occurred in his countenance. It was not abrupt, but rather a gradual unfolding, akin to a window opening into a chamber that had been sealed for an extended period. "Yes," he responded, "you may call me Uncle Thad." The initial clue emerged in November. A gentleman residing in Minneapolis whose appearance aligned with the description of Rowan Orley within a missing persons database update. The investigator had identified a potential match, a 48-year-old individual named Ronan Vale, who lived independently, worked as a machinist, had no known family connections, and whose facial structure corresponded with Rowan's age progression software. Thaddeus and I embarked on a 5-hour journey to Minneapolis in his Lexus. Our conversation flowed throughout the drive, encompassing our lives, my current residence in his guest house, and the fact that I had yet to inform my parents in Arizona about my divorce. Why have you refrained from contacting them? Because my father is not a man who offers solace. My mother is prone to worry. I wish to spare her that distress. It is simpler to convey this news after I have ascertained the trajectory of my next chapter. Are you presently determining that? I'm actively engaged in that process. Upon our arrival in Minneapolis, we observed Ronan Vale from a distance in the parking area of the machining facility where he was employed. Thaddeus possessed binoculars, while I had a camera with a telescopic lens. The individual emerged from the shop during his lunch break. He was tall, with dark hair, and of the appropriate age. He proceeded to his truck, lit a cigarette, and consumed a sandwich. Thaddeus observed him for 6 minutes before lowering the binoculars. It is not him. Are you certain? A father possesses an innate knowing. It is not him. The contour of his ears is incorrect. The posture of his shoulders is aberrant. Rowan stood differently. This is not Rowan. What is our course of action? We return home. We eliminate this possibility. We continue our search. We made the 5-hour drive back. Our conversation was minimal. Thaddeus remained silent, not with the quietude of disappointment, but with the distinct composure of a man who had undertaken this process numerous times before and had learned to temper his expectations. The second lead surfaced in January. Unidentified human remains discovered in rural Missouri, belonging to a male whose description at the time of his disappearance closely matched Rowan's. Early 20s, dark hair, approximately 6 feet 1 inch in height. The remains have been unearthed in a wooded area adjacent to a county road and have been interred for what the medical examiner estimated to be at least 20 years, possibly longer. Thaddeus and I traveled to the medical examiner's office in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, an 8-hour round trip. Thaddeus's DNA profile was already on file with CODIS, the Federal Missing Persons Database. The examiner had proactively requested a comparison. The results were anticipated within 48 hours. We occupied a hotel for 2 nights. Thaddeus was far from serene. In fact, he exhibited a level of agitation I had never before witnessed. Not because he believed it was his son, but because he harbored the fear that it might be, and simultaneously, the fear that it might not be. And he was apprehensive of the profound impact either outcome would have upon him. What outcome do you desire? I inquired on the second night, seated in the hotel lobby at 1 o'clock in the morning. I am uncertain. You are uncertain? If it is him, I can finally begin the process of mourning. If it is not him, I can sustain my hope. Both eventualities are dreadful. Both eventualities offer a measure of relief. I cannot determine which I prefer. The results arrived the following morning. The remains were not Rowan's. Thaddeus wept in the hotel room, not from grief, nor from relief, but from an emotion that was neither and both, the distinctive lament of a father denied resolution for 35 years and who had just been denied it once more. I sat on the edge of the adjacent bed, remaining silent, for there were no words that could adequately convey comfort, and sometimes the most profound assistance one can offer a man in pain is simply to be present in his company without attempting to mend his suffering. The third lead presented itself in March, and it is this third lead that compels me to share this narrative. A social worker in Portland, Oregon, named Hyacinth Pell, had been diligently following the Rowan Orley case for years through various missing persons networks. When the foundation, which Thaddeus had recently established and which utilized my likeness as the age progression reference, disseminated an update featuring my photograph captioned, This is what Rowan Orley might appear as today at 54 years of age. Hyacinth observed this. She contacted Thaddeus that afternoon. Mr. Orley, I am employed at a group home for adults with memory impairments in Portland. We house a resident who has been with us for 23 years. He was discovered in 2003 wandering in downtown Portland, completely devoid of identification, with no recollection of his identity, and unable to disclose his name. We refer to him as Theo. He is approximately the correct age. And when I observe your update today, specifically the photograph of the man who would be Rowan, I had a premonition that he might be a match. Thaddeus and I were en route to Portland on a flight the following day. The group home was situated in a tranquil neighborhood. Theo was 54 years old. He had resided there since 2003. According to Hyacinth, he was gentle, reserved, a man who had never regained his memories and had found a form of acceptance in not knowing his origins. He no longer poses inquiries, Hyacinth informed us. He did so for the initial few years, then ceased. Now he resides here, assists with the gardening, helps with meal preparation, and possesses a tranquility that individuals attain when they have come to terms with the irretrievable nature of their past. May we see him? Certainly, but I must offer a caution. If he is in fact your son, Mr. Orley, he will not recognize you. He possesses no memories predating 2003. The reunion, should it transpire, will be unilateral. I understand. We entered the common area of the group home. Theo was present, seated in a chair beside a window, engrossed in a book. He looked up as we entered. His eyes met Thaddeus's, and nothing occurred. Thaddeus observed him, truly observed him, for approximately 90 seconds. I watched Thaddeus's face, a habit I had cultivated over 6 months, and I witnessed the precise moment of his realization. It is not him, Thaddeus stated softly to Hyacinth. Yes, his eyes are incongruous. The bone structure is similar but incorrect. This is not my son. Hyacinth's expression faltered, not with disappointment for Thaddeus, but with regret for her resident. I am profoundly sorry, Mr. Orley. I held such strong hopes. Please do not apologize. You performed a commendable act by contacting me, but this is not Rowan. He looked towards Theo, who continued to observe us with mild curiosity. Thaddeus approached Theo and extended his hand. Theo clasped it. Hello, sir. I am Thaddeus. Hello, Thaddeus. I am Theo. Theo, I was searching for my son. You are not he, but I am gratified to have encountered you. Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure to meet you as well. We departed from the group home. En route to the hotel in the car, Thaddeus was introspective. I presumed it was sorrow. It was not. Griffin, I need to contemplate something. What is it? Theo has resided in that group home for 23 years. No family has claimed him. He has no memory. He does not know who he is, yet he is someone. He is someone's missing son, brother, or husband. And his visage, his true visage, not my son's visage, is contained within a database that was recently updated with a depiction of Rowan's potential appearance. If Hyacinth contacted me because she believed Theo might be my Rowan, it signifies that Theo aligns with a general description. However, it is an imperfect alignment. And if the alignment is imperfect, it implies he is another person's missing individual. And so, therefore, we can assist in locating his family while we are here. I possess the resources. My foundation has the connections. Let us endeavor to ascertain Theo's true identity. Thaddeus and his investigators dedicated a week to the task. Cross-referencing Theo's approximate age, his physical description, the date he was found in Portland, his lack of identification, and conducting facial recognition searches against dozens of older missing persons databases, those that contained only cases reported prior to social media, rendering every face searchable. On April 3rd, 2026, they achieved a match. A gentleman named Caleb Fenwick reported missing from Billings, Montana in 1998. His family had reported him absent after he failed to return from a hiking excursion in the Cascades. The case had grown cold. His two sisters, both still alive and actively searching, had never ceased to ponder his fate. Thaddeus arranged for a DNA comparison. It proved to be a match. Theo was indeed Caleb Fenwick. The Fenwick family journeyed to Portland. I was present during their reunion. When Caleb Fenwick's sisters entered the group home and beheld their brother for the first time in 27 years, he did not recognize them. He could not. Amnesia did not function in that manner. However, he observed them, and one of the sisters, Annalise, spoke. "Caleb, it is I. It is Anna. We have been searching for you." Caleb did not recall, but he reached out. He touched her face, and he stated, "I believe I know you. I believe you do. I am sorry that I cannot recall. It is quite all right. We will inform you. We have 30 years of stories to recount. Take your time." Thaddeus and I observed from across the room. Thaddeus was weeping, not from sorrow, but from something else, something I lacked the vocabulary for until later when I inquired about on our flight home. "What was that?" I asked. "Purpose," he replied. "I have dedicated 35 years to searching for my son. I have not found him. I may never find him. However, the search, the process, the database, the network, the image on the Foundation's website facilitated the return of Caleb Fenwick to his sisters. Griffin, if the sole outcome of my search is the reunification of other missing children with their families, that will have been sufficient. Do you genuinely mean that?" I did not comprehend my sincerity until today, but yes, I do. 8 months have elapsed since that Tuesday evening at the diner. It is now June of 2026. I continue to reside in the guest house. I am still employed by Thaddeus. We have expanded the Foundation's scope. It is now designated as the Rowan Orley Foundation for Missing Persons, and we provide assistance to families, particularly those who cannot afford private investigators, in their pursuit of their lost loved ones. Since we commenced tracking outcomes, the Foundation has facilitated the resolution of 7 missing persons cases. For reunions, 3 identifications of remains. 7 families who have received answers after enduring years of uncertainty. Rowan Orley remains missing. He may remain so indefinitely. However, Thaddeus is no longer engaged in the search in solitude. My children visit every other weekend and most Wednesdays. Kipton is no longer withdrawn. He has begun assisting with the Foundation's social media presence, a task perfectly suited for a 15-year-old, and he approaches it with the earnestness that boys of that age invest in activities that imbue them with a sense of purpose. Juno is Uncle Thad's most cherished individual. She presents him with drawings. She leaves them on his desk during her visits. Crayon depictions of a man, a cornfield, and a house with a verdant roof. He has preserved every single one. Roxanne remarried in January to a gentleman named Trevor who practices at the same dental clinic where she manages the office. I encountered him once during a child exchange. He appeared amiable. He exhibited no animosity towards me, nor did I towards him. We exchanged handshakes. I implored him to treat my children with kindness. He affirmed his intention to do so. I believed him, which is the natural response when one has exhausted the energy required for suspicion towards individuals making a genuine effort. I have not engaged in dating. I am not prepared. I may not be ready for a considerable duration. This does not trouble me. The guest house is tranquil. The cornfields stretch endlessly. Thaddeus and I partake in dinner together 3 evenings a week at his expansive farmhouse. I prepare the meals. He peruses the newspaper. We discuss the week's events, the emerging leads, the ongoing cases. He recounts anecdotes about Rowan, his distinctive laugh, his mechanical aptitude, the manner in which Rowan would dismantle the family lawnmower simply to comprehend its inner workings. Do you realize something, Griffin? What is it? Rowan would disassemble the lawnmower because he sought to understand its operational principles. That is precisely why you dismantled your previous existence. You lost your employment. You lost your marital union. You relinquished the elements that defined you as Griffin Locke, the supervisor. And rather than attempting to reassemble those components to their original configuration, you permitted another individual to deconstruct them further and demonstrate how they could be reconfigured differently. Are you referring to yourself? I am referring to myself and to you. Thank you for offering me that booth that evening, Thaddeus. Thank you for not departing from it. Was Roxanne wrong to tell her husband he was worthless and take his children on the worst day of his life? Or did Thaddeus save Griffin by seeing value in a face that looked like hope? Tell me what you think in the comments below. If this story made you think, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We post new family dramas every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.